How to Talk to Anyone by Leil Lowndes, Audiobook Series, Part 4. Let's begin. Part 5. Why? We're just alike. We're like peas in a pod. If you squint your eyes and look up carefully at a flight of birds, you'll see finches flying with finches, swallows soaring with swallows, and yellow birds winging it with yellow birds. The avian apartheid escalates. You'll never see a barn swallow with a bank swallow, or even a yellow bird hanging out with a yellow finch. Somebody said it shorter. Birds of a feather flock together. Happily, humans are smarter than birds. In one respect, at least, we have brains capable of overcoming bias. Really smart human beings work together, play together, and break bread together. Does that mean their comfort level is high? Well, that depends on the human being. Our purpose here is not to examine the absurdity of apartheid. It is to leave no stone unturned in making sure people are completely comfortable doing business or pleasure with you. It has been proven beyond a doubt. People are most receptive to those they feel have the same values in life. In one study, individuals were first given a personality and beliefs test. 20. They were then paired off with a partner and told to go spend time together. Before meeting, half the couples were told they were very similar in beliefs to their partner. The other half were told they were dissimilar. Neither statement was true. However, when quizzed afterward on how much they liked each other, partners who believed they were similar liked each other a lot more than the couples who thought themselves to be dissimilar, demonstrating we have a predisposition toward people we believe are just like us. We are most comfortable giving our business and friendship to those we feel share our values and beliefs in life. To that end, I offer 6 techniques to create sensations of similarity with everyone you wish, along with making more profound rapport with customers, friends, and associates. Using the following techniques develops a deeper understanding and empathy with people of all races and backgrounds. They also open doors that might otherwise be closed to you. Be a copycat. Watch their every move. Just like the finch flaps its wings faster than the gliding eagle, people of different backgrounds move differently. For example, in the US, people from the wide open plains tend to stand farther from each other. City people, systematically sardined into subways and crowded buses, stand closer. Asian Americans make modest movements. Italian Americans make massive ones. At tea time, the finishing school set genuflects and gracefully lowers derrieres onto the sofa. When the ladies reach for a cup, they hold the saucer in one hand and the cup in the other. Pinky ever so slightly extended. Folks who never finished any manners school make a dive into the middle of the sofa and clutch the cup with both hands. Is one right? Is the other wrong? No. However, top communicators know when doing business with a derriere dipping pinky extender or two-fisted mug grabber, they darn well should do the same. People feel comfortable around people who move just like they do. I have a friend who travels the country giving an outrageous seminar called How to Marry the Rich. Jeannie was once in a Las Vegas casino when a television reporter asked if she could tell the real rich from the great pretenders. Of course, Jeannie answered. All right, challenged the reporter. Who is the wealthiest man in this room? Convened at the next table were 3 men in tailored suits. Hayward of Mayfair, London, no doubt. Handmade shirts, Charvet of Place Vendôme in Paris, no doubt. And sipping scotch, single malt Laphroaig from the Scottish island of Islay, no doubt. The reporter naturally assumed Jeannie would choose one of these likely candidates. Instead, with the scrutiny of a hunting dog, Jeannie's eyes scanned the room. Like a trained basset hound, she instinctively pointed a long red fingernail at a fellow in torn jeans at a corner table. She murmured, "He's very rich." Flabbergasted, the reporter asked Jeannie, "How can you tell?" "He moves like old money," she said. "You see," Jeannie went on to explain, "there's moving like old money, there's moving like new money, and there's moving like no money." Jeannie could tell the unlikely chap in the corner was obviously sitting on big assets, and all because of the way he moved. Technique 44. Be a copycat. Watch people. Look at the way they move: small movements, big movements, fast, slow, jerky, fluid, old, young, classy, trashy. Pretend the person you are talking to is your dance instructor. Is he a jazzy mover? Is she a balletic mover? Watch his or her body, then imitate the style of movement. That makes your conversation partner subliminally real comfy with you. They're buying you too. If you're in sales, copy not only your customer's class, but the class of your product as well. I live in a section of New York City called Soho, which is a few blocks above the famous, for being trashy, Canal Street. Often, clutching my purse tightly and dodging the crowds on Canal Street, I'll pass pickpocket turned salesman for the day. He furtively looks around and flashes a greasy handkerchief at me with a piece of jewelry on it. "Psst, wanna buy a gold chain?" His nervous thief's demeanor alone could get him arrested. Now, about 60 blocks uptown, you'll find the fashionable and very expensive Tiffany's jewelry store. Occasionally, clutching my fantasies of being able to afford something therein, I stroll through the huge gilt doors. Imagine one of the impeccably dressed sales professionals behind the beveled glass counters, furtively looking around and saying to me, "Psst, wanna buy a diamond?" No sale. Match your personality to your product. Selling handmade suits? A little decorum, please. Selling jeans? A little cool, please. Selling sweatsuits? A little sporty, please. And so on for whatever you're selling. Remember, you are your customer's buying experience. Therefore, you are part of the product they're buying. Echoing. We're like peas in a pod. Have you ever been gabbing with a new acquaintance and, after a few moments, you've said to yourself, "This person and I think alike. We're on the same wavelength." It's a fabulous feeling. I almost like falling in love. Lovers call it chemistry. New friends talk of instant rapport, and business people say a meeting of minds. Yet it's the same magic, that sudden sense of warmth and closeness, that strange sensation of wow, we were old friends at once. When we were children, making friends was easier. Most of the kids we met grew up in the same town, and so they were on our wavelength. Then the years went by, we grew older, we moved away. Our backgrounds, our experiences, our goals, our lifestyles became diverse. Thus, we fell off each other's wavelengths. Wouldn't it be great to have a magic surfboard to help you hop right back on everybody's wavelength whenever you wanted? Here it is, a linguistic device that gets you riding on high rapport with everyone you meet. If you stand on a mountain cliff and shout "hello, oh" across the valley, your identical "hello, oh" thunders back at you. I call the technique echoing because, like the mountain, you echo your conversation partner's precise words. It all started across the ocean. In many European countries, you'll hear 5, 10, or more languages within the language. For example, in Italy, the Sicilians from the south speak a dialect that seems like gobbledygook to northern Italians. In an Italian restaurant, I once overheard a diner discover his waiter was also from Udine, a town in northeastern Italy, where they speak the Friulano dialect. The diner stood up and hugged the waiter like he was a long-lost brother. They started babbling in a tongue that left the other Italian waiters shrugging. In America, we have dialects, too. We just aren't conscious of them. In fact, we have thousands of different words, depending on our region, our job, our interests, and our upbringing. Once, when traveling across the country, I tried to order a soda like a Coke or 7 Up in a highway restaurant. It took some explaining before the waitress understood I wanted what she called a pop. Perhaps because the English speaking world is so large, Americans have a vaster choice of words for the same old stuff than any language I've encountered. Family members find themselves speaking alike, friends use the same words, and associates in a company or members in a club talk alike. Everyone you meet will have his or her own language that subliminally distinguishes them from outsiders. The words are all English, but they vary from area to area, industry to industry, and even family to family. The linguistic device that says we are on the same wavelength. When you want to give someone the subliminal feeling you're just alike, use their words, not yours. Suppose you are selling a car to a young mother who tells you she is concerned about safety because she has a young toddler. When explaining the safety features of the car, use her word. Don't use whatever word you call your kids. Don't even say child protection lock, which was in your sales manual. Tell your prospect, no toddler can open the window because of the driver's control device. Even call it a toddler protection lock. When mom hears toddler coming from your lips, she feels you are family because that's how all her relatives refer to her little tyke. Suppose your prospect had said kid or infant. Fine. Echo any word she used. Well, almost any word. If she'd said my brat, you might want to pass on echoing this time. Echoing at parties. Let's say you are at a party. It's a huge bash with many different types of people. You are first chatting with a lawyer who tells you her profession is often maligned. When it comes your turn to speak, say profession too. If you say job, it puts a subconscious barrier between you. Next, you meet a construction worker who starts talking about his job. Now you're in trouble if you say, well, in my profession, he'd think you were being hoity-toity. After the lawyer and the construction worker, you talk to several freelancers. First a model, then a professional speaker, finally a pop musician. All three of these folks will use different words for their work. The model brags about her bookings. The professional speaker might say bookings, but he is more apt to boast of his speaking engagements. A pop musician might say, yeah man, I get a lot of gigs. It's tough to memorize what they all call their work. Just keep your ears open and echo their word after they say it. Echoing goes beyond job names. For example, if you are chatting with a boat owner and you call his boat an it, he labels you the real landlubber. He reverently refers to his beloved boat, of course, as a she. If you listen carefully, you hear language subtleties you never dreamed existed. Would you believe using the wrong synonym for a seemingly uncomplicated word, like have labels you a know-nothing in somebody else's world? For example, cat lovers purr about having cats, but horse people would say owning horses. And fish folk don't own fish. They talk about keeping fish. Hey, no big deal. But if you use the wrong word, your conversation partner will assume, correctly, that you are a stranger in his or her hobby land. The peril of not echoing. Sometimes you lose out by not echoing. My friend Phil and I were talking with several guests at a party. One woman proudly told the group about the wonderful new ski chalet she had just purchased. She was looking forward to inviting her friends up to her little chalet in the mountains. That's wonderful, said Phil, secretly hoping for an invitation. Where exactly is your cabin? Kerplunk. There went Phil's chances for an invitation to the ladies' chalet. I couldn't resist. After the conversation, I whispered to my friend, Phil, why did you insult that woman by calling her chalet a cabin? Phil scratched his head and said, "What do you mean, insult her? Cabin is a beautiful word. My family has a cabin in Cape Cod, and I grew up loving the word, the associations, the joy of a cabin. In other words, the connotations of cabin." Well, fine, Phil. The word cabin may be beautiful to you, but obviously the skier preferred the word chalet, professional echoing. In today's sales environment, customers expect salespeople to be problem solvers, not just vendors. They feel you don't grasp their industry's problems if you don't speak their language. I have a friend, Penny, who sells office furniture. Among her clients are people in publishing, advertising, broadcasting, and a few lawyers. Penny's sales manual says office furniture. However, she told me if she used the word office with all of her clients, they'd assume she knew nothing about their respective industries. She told me her client, the purchasing officer in advertising, talks about his advertising agency. Penny's publishing client says publishing house. The lawyers talk about furniture for their firm, and her radio clients use the word station instead of office. Hey, Penny says, it's their salt mine. They can call it whatever the heck they please. And, she added, if I want to make the sale, I'd better call it the same thing. Technique 45. Echoing is a simple linguistic technique that packs a powerful wallop. Listen to the speaker's arbitrary choice of nouns, verbs, prepositions, adjectives, and echo them back. Hearing their words come out of your mouth creates subliminal rapport. It makes them feel you share their values, their attitudes, their interests, their experiences. Echoing is politically correct insurance. Here's a quiz. You're talking with the pharmacist and you ask her, "How long have you worked at the drugstore?" What's wrong with that question? Give up? It's the word drugstore. Pharmacists abhor the word because it conjures up many industry problems. They are used to hearing it from outsiders, but it's a tip-off that they are unaware of or insensitive to their professional problems. They prefer pharmacy. Recently, at a reception, I introduced one of my friends, Susan, as a daycare worker. Afterward, Susan begged, "Leil, please, do not call me a daycare worker. We're childcare workers." Whoops! Time and recent history quickly make certain terms archaic. A group's intense preference for one word is not arbitrary. Certain jobs, minorities, and special interest groups often have a history the public is not sensitive to. When that history has too much pain attached to it, people invent another word that doesn't have bitter connotations. I have a dear friend, Leslie, who is in a wheelchair. She says whenever anyone says the word handicapped, she cringes. Leslie says it makes her feel less than whole. We prefer you say person with a disability. She then gave a moving explanation. We people with disabilities are the same as every other able-bodied person. We say Abby, she added. Abes go through life with all the same baggage we do. We just carry one extra piece, a disability. It's simple. It's effective. To show respect and make people feel close to you, echo their words. It makes you a more sensitive communicator and keeps you out of trouble every time. Potent imaging. Old boy analogies are unsportsmanlike conduct with the girls. I recently had to make a presentation to 15 men in a corporate meeting. Okay, I said to myself as I stood up, 15 Martians and 1 Venusian. No problem. I'd read Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. I'd explored neurological differences in men's and women's brains. I knew all about gender-specific body language signals. Hey, I teach communications differences. I was well prepared to talk to these men, get my point across, and fend any questions. Everything started out fine. I'd conceived my presentation clearly and concisely, developed each theme, and presented it flawlessly. Then I sat down and confidently invited questions and open discussion. That's when it fell apart. All I remember is a horrifying barrage of questions couched in football analogies. Do you think we dropped the ball on that one? One man asked. Yeah, another responded. But can we make a fumble recovery? Those two I understood. However, when it got to pass coverage and intentional grounding, I started to lose it. When one guy raved about a Hail Mary pass being needed to save the deal, I suffered the ultimate humiliation. I had to ask, what does that mean? The guys looked at each other knowingly and then smiled condescendingly as they explained it to me. That night, I had sadistic fantasies of 15 women running the company, and one man left scratching his head as we bandied about childbirth analogies. We won't get his new proposal till the third trimester, reports the account exec. Yeah, but that's 6 months away. Let's get it by C-section, responds the comptroller. Why bother? Asks the marketing VP. All his ideas are developed in vitro anyway. I'm about to go into postpartum depression, murmurs the CEO. The lone male employee is left as confused and humiliated as I was in the face of football analogies. Ahem. The aim of this book is not to feed fiendish fantasies, but to improve communications. To that end, I offer the following technique based on analogies, not just football analogies. On-target analogies hit bullseye. Analogies can be an effective communications tool if you evoke images from the life of the person you are talking to. Men don't use football analogies to obfuscate matters or to confuse women, but to clarify situations for each other. Analogies from the sport bring situations to life for men, because generally they watch more football than women. Moving on to other sports analogies, everyone knows what the speaker means when he or she hears "will never strike out" with this solution. Nevertheless, a baseball fan would find it a more compelling image as he would analogies like caught on the fly, hitting the dirt, or throwing a spitball. You've heard people say this solution is right on target. We all understand it, but the phrasing would be more dramatic for archery enthusiasts. If your listener were a bowler, speaking of gutter balls or big splits would bring whatever you were discussing to life. If your business buddies were basketball fans, analogies like hookshot or airball would land right in their basket. If your client wrestles, saying feints and scissor holds would be the way to grab him. These analogies might sound far-fetched to you, but they are potent communications tools when they evoke your conversation partner's world. Why not use the most powerful terms possible to get your point across and make the sale? I call the technique potent imaging. Technique 46. Potent imaging. Does your customer have a garden? Talk about sowing the seeds for success. Does your boss own a boat? Tell him or her about a concept that will hold water or stay afloat. Maybe he is a private pilot. Talk about a concept really taking off. She plays tennis? Tell her it really hits the sweet spot. Evoke your listener's interest or lifestyle and weave images around it. To give your points more power and punch, use analogies from your listener's world, not your own. Potent imaging also tells your listeners you think like them and hints you share their interests. Pardon me while I return momentarily to my sadistic fantasies of the hopelessly confused lone male employee. The all-female management team is now arguing the corporate strategy using not football, of course, but ballet analogies. I say, let's do the corporate takeover allegro, she suggests. Nah, you gotta go adagio in these matters, her colleague responds. But what if they do a tour jeté while we're poised in fifth? Come on, did you ever see a good partiole from their president? The top woman settles it. I say, let's just give him a little reverence and then a grand battement in the balls. Employ empathizers. Beyond, yep, yeah. While listening to someone talk, we often vocalize or purr throaty little sounds to reassure the speaker we have heard their words. In fact, with some, it's such a habit, the noises escape their throats unconsciously. My friend Phil is a consummate, constant, and incontinent whenever I'm talking. Occasionally, if I'm feeling contentious after he's given one of his agreeable in response to something I've said, I challenge him with, "Okay, Phil, what did I say?" Well, gosh. Phil has no idea. It's not his fault. He's male. Men are especially guilty of the not really listening habit. Once, when I was on a monologue about nothing in particular, Phil was on a real roll. To test his listening skills, I slipped in, "Yes, this afternoon I think I'll go out and get tattooed all over my body." Phil nodded his habitual Well, umming is better than a blank stare. However, it's not the choice of top communicators. Try replacing your with full-blown empathizers. What are empathizers? Empathizers are simple, short, supportive statements. Unlike they are complete sentences such as, "I can appreciate you decided to do that," or "that really is exciting." Empathizers can be one-sentence positive critiques like, "Yes, that was the honorable thing to do," or "It's charming you felt that way." When you respond with complete sentences instead of the usual grunts, not only do you come across as more articulate, your listener feels that you really understand. Technique 47. Employ empathizers. Don't be an unconscious Vocalize complete sentences to show your understanding. Dust your dialogue with phrases like "I see what you mean." Sprinkle it with sentimental sparklers like "that's a lovely thing to say." Your empathy impresses your listeners and encourages them to continue. Of course, you pay a price. In order to use the right empathizers, you do need to listen. Now let's fine-tune this technique and explore advanced empathizing. Anatomically correct empathizers. A sound idea about 10 years ago, I had a roommate named Brenda. Brenda was a tap dance teacher who didn't just tap dance to make a living. She lived to tap. Posters of famous American tap dancers, Bill Bojangles, Robinson and Charles Honey Coles, plastered her walls. She didn't walk around the house. She tapped her way from room to room. It was noisy, but at least when a phone call came for Brenda, I never had trouble finding her. Once I asked Brenda when she got interested in tap. She said, "From the moment I first opened my ears." Her ears, I thought. That's strange. Most people say from the moment I opened my eyes. At that moment, I realized Brenda saw the world more through her ears than her eyes. We all perceive the world through 5 senses. We see the world. We hear the world. We feel the world. We smell the world. And we taste the world. Therefore, we talk in terms of those 5 senses. Proponents of neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, tell us for each person, one sense is stronger than others. For Brenda, it was her hearing. Brenda told me she grew up in a dark apartment below street level in New York City. She remembers, as an infant, hearing the pitter-patter of feet walking just above her crib on the pavement. As a toddler, her tiny ears were bombarded with honking horns, shrieking sirens, and tire chains slapping the icy streets. She especially remembers the clumpity-clump of police horses' hooves on the pavement outside her window. Her first perceptions of the outside world came to her through her ears. To this day, sound dominates her life. Brenda, the tap dancer, is an auditory person. Since neurolinguists suggest invoking our listeners' strongest sense, I tried a few auditory references on Brenda. Rather than saying, "That looks good to me," I'd say, "That sounds good." Instead of saying, "I see what you mean," I'd say, "I hear you." When I used these auditory references, I felt she paid more attention. So I started listening very carefully to all my friends to discover which was their primary perception. Sometimes I'd hear visual references like, "I see what you mean." "That looks good to me." "I can't picture myself doing that." I take a dim view of that idea. From my perspective, wow, I thought I was really onto something. A wrinkle develops, but then, whoops, at other times, I'd hear that same friend say, "Yeah, I hear you." "Sure, that sounds good to me." I kept saying to myself it would work. That has a negative ring to it. He really tuned out on the whole idea. Something tells me this wasn't going to be quite as easy as I'd expected. However, I wasn't ready to give up. Once, Brenda and I went skiing with several friends. That night, we were at a party. One of our friends was telling a group of people the ski slopes were beautiful. Everything was so crystal clear and white. A visual person? I asked myself. Another skier added, "The feel of the fresh snow on our faces was terrific." Aha, a kinesthetic person, I mused silently. Sure enough, just then, Brenda said, "Today was so silent. The only sound you could hear was the wind in your ears as you came swooshing down the slopes." That little riff convinced me there was something to it. However, I still found it difficult to discern one's primary sense. A simple solution. Here's what I found does work. And it doesn't take too much detective work on your part. I call the technique anatomically correct empathizers, and it's easy to master. Unless it is obvious the person you are speaking with is primarily visual, auditory, or kinesthetic, simply respond in his or her mode of the moment. Match your empathizers to the current sense someone is talking through. For example, suppose a business colleague describing a financial plan says, "With this plan, we can see our way clear in 6 months." Since this time she's using primarily visual references, say, "I see what you mean," or "You really have a clear picture of that situation." If instead your colleague had said, "This plan has a good ring to it," you'd substitute auditory empathizers like, "It does sound great," or "I hear you." A third possibility, suppose she had said, "I have a gut feeling this plan will work." Now you give her a kinesthetic empathizer like, "I can understand how you feel," or "You have a good grasp of that problem." Technique 48. Anatomically correct empathizers. What part of their anatomy are your associates talking though? Their eyes, their ears, their gut. For visual people, use visual empathizers to make them think you see the world the way they do. For auditory folks, use auditory empathizers to make them think you hear them loud and clear. For kinesthetic types, use kinesthetic empathizers to make them think you feel the same way they do. What about the other two senses, taste and smell? Well, I've never run up against any gustatory or olfactory types, but you could always compliment a chef by saying, "That's a delicious idea." And if you are talking to your dog, olfactory, of course, tell him, "The whole idea stinks." The next technique helps create affinity with a single word, the premature we. We talk like old friends at once by just eavesdropping for a few moments on any two people chatting. You could tell a lot about their relationship. You could tell if they were new acquaintances or old friends. You could tell whether a man and a woman were strangers or a couple. You wouldn't even need to hear friends call each other pal, buddy, or mate. You wouldn't need to hear a man and a woman whisper dear, sweetheart, or turtle dove. It wouldn't matter what they were discussing or even their tone of voice. You could even be blindfolded and tell a lot about their relationship because the technique I'm about to share has nothing to do with body language. How? A fascinating progression of conversation unfolds as people become closer. Here's how it develops. Level 1, cliches. Two strangers talking together primarily toss cliches back and forth. For instance, when chatting about the universally agreed upon world's dullest subject, the weather, one stranger might say to the other, beautiful, sunny weather we've been having. Or, boy, some rain, huh? That's level 1, cliches. Level 2, facts. People who know each other but are just acquaintances often discuss facts. You know, Joe, we've had twice as many sunny days this year to date as last. Or, yeah, well, we finally decided to put in a swimming pool to beat the heat. Level 3, feelings and personal questions. When people become friends, they often express their feelings to each other, even on subjects as dull as the weather. George, I just love these sunny days. They also ask each other personal questions. How about you, Betty? Are you a sun person? Level 4, we statements. Now we progress to the highest level of intimacy. This level is richer than facts and creates more rapport than feelings. Or it's we and us statements. Friends discussing the weather might say, if we keep having this good weather, it'll be a great summer. Lovers might say, I hope this good weather keeps up for us so we can go swimming on our trip. A technique to achieve the ultimate verbal intimacy grows out of this phenomenon. Simply use the word we prematurely. You can use it to make a client, a prospect, a stranger feel you are already friends. Use it to make a potential romantic partner feel the two of you are already an item. I call it the premature we. In casual conversation, simply cut through levels 1 and 2, jump straight to 3 and 4. Ask your prospects feelings on something the way you would query a friend. George, how do you feel about the new governor? Then use the pronoun we when discussing anything that might affect the two of you. Do you think we're going to prosper during his administration? Make it a point to concoct we sentences, the kind people instinctively reserve for friends, lovers, and other intimates. I think we'll survive while the governor's in office. The word we fosters togetherness. It makes the listener feel connected. It gives a subliminal feeling of you and me against the cold, cold world. When you prematurely say we or us, even to strangers, it subconsciously brings them closer. It subliminally hints you are already friends. At a party, you might say to someone standing behind you at the buffet line, hey, this looks great. They really laid out a nice spread for us. Or, uh-oh, we're going to get fat if we let ourselves enjoy all of this. Technique 49. The premature, we create the sensation of intimacy with someone even if you've met just moments before. Scramble the signals in their psyche by skipping conversational levels 1 and 2 and cutting right to levels 3 and 4. Elicit intimate feelings by using the magic words we, us, and our. Well, we have just explored how to copy our conversation partners' movements with be a copycat, echo their words, evoke potent images from their world, create a bond through their primary sense with anatomically correct empathizers, and establish subliminal friendship with words like we. What else do friends, lovers, and close associates have in common? A history. The final technique in this section is a device to give a fairly new acquaintance the warm and fuzzy feeling the two of you have been together for a long, long time. Instant history. Our own private joke. Lovers whisper phrases in each other's ears that mean nothing to anyone but themselves. Friends crack up over a few words that sound like gobbledygook to anyone overhearing them. Close business associates chuckle about shared experiences. One company I've worked with has seen re engineering, empowerment, TQM, and team building come and go in one decade. At company parties, the employees never fail to crack up over the time when the whole company, managers to mailroom clerks, scrambled up a 29-foot pole together, all in the name of team building. The CEO slipped down the pole and broke his big toe. At the next weekly meeting, the CEO shook his crutch and caustically announced, "No more team exercises." Thus, the death of team building and the birth of a private joke. Out of shared experiences like this, a company culture grows. These employees have a history and a language to go with it. To this day, whenever they want to put an abrupt end to any idea, they say, "Let's shake a crutch at it," or "Let's slide that one down the flagpole." They all smile. Nobody knows what they mean except fellow employees. The playwright Neil Simon, sometimes with a single word, can make an entire Broadway audience understand two performers on stage are either married or longtime friends. The actor simply says something to the actress that makes no sense to the audience. Then both of them laugh uproariously. Everybody gets the message. These two people are an item. Every time my friend Daryl and I meet, we don't say hello. We say quack. Why? We met at a party 5 years ago, and in our first conversation, Daryl told me he grew up on a duck farm. When I told him I'd never seen a duck farm, he performed the best human imitation of a duck I'd ever seen. He flipped his head side to side, looking at me first out of one eye, then the other, all the while flapping his arms and quacking. I got such a laugh out of his performance that it inspired him to do a full flat-footed duck waddle for me. It was contagious. Together we waddled around the room, flapping and quacking. We made absolute fools of ourselves that evening. The next day, my phone rang. I picked up the receiver to hear, not "Hello, this is Daryl," but simply quack. I'm sure that's what started our friendship. To this day, every time I hear his quack on the phone, it floods me with happy, if a tad embarrassing memories. It recalls our history and renews our friendship, no matter how long it's been since we last quacked at each other. Technique 50. Instant history. When you meet a stranger you'd like to make less a stranger, search for some special moment you shared during your first encounter. Then find a few words that reprieve the laugh, the warm smile, the good feelings the two of you felt. Now, just like old friends, you have a history together, an instant history. With anyone you'd like to make part of your personal or professional future, look for special moments together, then make them a refrain. Now what's left? Chemistry, charisma, and confidence are 3 characteristics shared by big winners in all walks of life. Part 1 helped us make a dynamic, confident, and charismatic first impression with body language. In 2, we put smooth, small talk lyrics to our body ballet. Then in 3, we seized hints from the big boys and girls, so we're contenders for life's big league. Part 4 rescued us from being tongue-tied with folks with whom we have very little in common. And in 5, we learned techniques to create instant chemistry, instant intimacy, instant rapport. What's left? You guessed it, making people feel really good about themselves. But compliments are a dangerous weapon in today's world. One mishandling, and you can butcher the relationship. Let us now explore the power of praise, the folly of flattery, and how you can use these potent tools effectively. Part 6: The power of praise, the folly of flattery. Praise reappraised. Kids are experts at getting what they want. Perched on Papa's knee. Oh, Daddy, you're so wonderful. I know you'll buy me that new doll. The next morning with Mama in the supermarket. Oh, Mummy, I love you. You're the most bestest mummy in the world. I know you'll buy me that chocolate munchie. From the hungry infant's instinctive cooing as Mummy approaches the crib, to the car salesman's calculated praise as the prospect walks into the showroom, compliments come naturally to people when they want something from somebody. In fact, compliments are the most widely used and thoroughly endorsed of all getting what you want techniques. When Dale Carnegie wrote Begin with Praise, 15 million readers took it to heart. Most of us still think praise is the path to extracting what we want from someone. And yes, if it's as simple as dolls from daddy and munchies from mummy, it may be. But the business world has changed dramatically since Dale Carnegie's day. In today's world, not every smiling flatterer has the power to procure through praise. The malaise of unskilled praise. You give someone a compliment, you smile, waiting to see the warm feelings engulf the recipient. You may have to wait a long time. If he or she has a speck of suspicion that your praise is self-serving, it has the opposite effect. If your compliment is insincere or unskilled, it can wreck your chances of ever being trusted by that person again. It can abort a potential relationship before it ever gets off the runway. However, skilled praise is a different story. When done well, it gives the relationship immediate liftoff. It can make a sale, win a new friend, or rejuvenate a marriage on a golden anniversary. What is the difference between praise that lifts and flattery that flattens? Many factors enter the equation. They include your sincerity, timing, motivation, and wording. They also involve the recipient's self-image, professional position, experience with compliments, and judgment of your powers of perception. Of course, it entails the relationship between the two of you and how long you have known each other. If you're complimenting someone by phone, email, or snail mail, it even involves subtleties such as whether you've ever seen their face, either in person or a photograph. Mind-boggling, isn't it? Sociologists' research shows 1. A compliment from a new person is more potent than from someone you already know. 2. Your compliment has more credibility when given to an unattractive person or an attractive person whose face you've never seen. 3. You are taken more seriously if you preface your comments by some self-effacing remark, but only if your listener perceives you as higher on the totem pole. If you're lower, your self-effacing remark reduces your credibility. Complicated, this complimenting stuff? Rather than dizzying ourselves with the surfeit of specific studies, let's just put some terrific techniques in our little bag of tricks. Each of the following meets all the criteria of social scientists' findings. Here are 9 effective ways to praise in the new millennium. Grapevine glory. Depend on their keen sense of rumor. The risk in giving a compliment face to face is, of course, that the distrustful recipient will assume you are indulging in shameless, obsequious pandering to achieve your own greedy goals. It's a sad reality about compliments. If you lay a big one out of the blue on your boss, your prospect, or your sweetie, the recipient will probably think you're brown-nosing. Your main squeeze will assume you're suffering guilt over something you've done. So what's the solution? Hold back your sincere esteem? No, simply deliver it through the grapevine. The grapevine has long been a trusted means of communication. From the days when Catskills Comics insisted the best ways to spread news were telephone, telegraph, and tell a woman. We have known it works. Unfortunately, the grapevine is most often associated with bad news, the kind that goes in one ear and over the back fence. But the grapevine need not be laden only with gossip and sour grapes. Good news can travel through the same filament, and when it arrives in the recipient's ear, it is all the more delectable. This is not a new discovery. Back in 1732, Thomas Fuller wrote, "He's my friend that speaks well of me behind my back." We are more apt to trust someone who says nice things about us when we aren't listening than someone who flatters us to our face. No risk praise. Do it behind their back. Instead of telling someone directly of your admiration, tell someone who is close to the person you wish to compliment. For instance, suppose you want to be in the good graces of Jane Smith. Don't directly compliment Jane. Go to her close associate, Diane Doe, and say, Jane is a very dynamic woman. She said something so brilliant in the meeting the other day. Someday, she'll be running this company. I place 10 to 1 odds. Your comment will get back to Jane via the grapevine in 24 hours. Diane will tell her friend, "You should hear what so-and-so said about you the other day." Technique 51. Grapevine Glory. A compliment one hears is never as exciting as the one he overhears. A priceless way to praise is not by telephone, not by telegraph, but by tell a friend. This way, you escape possible suspicion that you are an apple polishing, bootlicking, egg sucking, back scratching sycophant trying to win brownie points. You also leave recipients with the happy fantasy that you are telling the whole world about their greatness. When you gave grapevine glory to Jane, Diane became the carrier pigeon of that compliment, which leads us to the next technique where you become the carrier pigeon of other people's compliments. Carrier pigeon, kudos, bring joy to the world. Like the brave little birdies, carrier pigeons have a long and valiant history. The dauntless winged messengers, often maimed by shellfire and dying after delivering their messages, have saved the lives of thousands. One tenacious little bird named Sher Ami is credited with saving 200 lives during the Battle of the Argonne in World War I. The brave one-legged little birdie, one of his wings shot through, carried a message dangling from his remaining ligament. The blood-smeared little ball of feathers arrived just in time to warn that the Germans were about to bomb the city. Stumpy Joe, another plucky pigeon, had such a heroic, battle-scarred career that his fans stuffed him, mounted him, and put him on display in the National Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio. And millions of other brave birds have brought joyful messages to racing pigeon enthusiasts around the world. In that fine tradition, I present the complimenting technique I call carrier pigeon kudos. Whenever you hear a laudatory comment about someone, don't let it end there. You don't need to write it, roll it up in a capsule, strap it to your leg like Stumpy Joe, and fly it to the recipient. Nevertheless, you can remember the kudos and verbally carry it to the person who will get the most pleasure, the person who was complimented. Keep your ears open for good things people say about each other. If your colleague Carl says something nice about another colleague, Sam, pass it on. Sam, Carl said the nicest thing about you the other day. Your sister tells you your first cousin is a dynamite relative. Go ahead and call Cuz. Your mother tells you she thinks David did a great job mowing the lawn. Pass it on to him. Hey, we all like a little appreciation, even from Mom. Here's where it benefits you. Everyone loves the bearer of glad tidings. When you bring someone third party kudos, They appreciate you as much as the complimenter. Call it gossip if you like. This is the good kind. Technique 52. Carrier pigeon, kudos. People immediately grow a beak and metamorphosize themselves into carrier pigeons when there's bad news. It's called gossip. Instead, become a carrier of good news and kudos. Whenever you hear something complimentary about someone, fly to them with the compliment. With your fans may not posthumously stuff you and put you on display in a museum like Stumpy Joe. But everyone loves the carrier pigeon of kind thoughts. Carry more cargo than compliments. Another way to warm hearts and win friends is to become a carrier pigeon of news items that might interest the recipient. Call, mail, or email people with information they might find interesting. If your friend, Ned, is a furniture designer in North Carolina, and you see a big article in the Los Angeles Times about furniture trends, fax it to him. If your client Sally is a sculptor in Seattle and you see her work in someone's home in New York, send her a note. I have a friend Dan in San Francisco who, whenever he runs across anything in the paper on communications, clips it and sends it to me. No note, just FAI regards, Dan in the corner. He's like my own private West Coast clipping service. Try it. Think of the money you'll save on greeting cards. A relevant clipping is the big winner's way of saying, I'm thinking of you and your interests. Implied magnificence. My exalted opinion of you just slipped out. Here's yet another caress for someone's ego. Don't give a blatant compliment. Merely imply something magnificent about your conversation partner. Several months ago, I was visiting an old friend in Denver whom I hadn't seen in a long time. When he came to my hotel to pick me up, he said, "Hello, Leil. How are you?" Then he paused, looked at me, and said, "You've obviously been well." Wow, I felt terrific. He implied I looked good, and that made my evening. Guess the good Lord decided I shouldn't have too swollen a head, however. Because later that evening, after my friend dropped me off, I got into the hotel elevator. A maintenance man entered at the third floor. He smiled at me. I smiled back. He looked at me again and said, "Gosh, Mum, was you a model?" Oh man, was I feeling on top of the world now. "When you was young," he continued. Crash! Why couldn't he have zipped his lip before the zinger? I loved the implication in the first part of his comment, but the second implied I was now an old lady. Ruined my next day. Heck, his unintentional low blow ruined my week. In fact, I still feel wretched about it. You have to be careful of unintentional bad implications. If visiting a new city, you stop someone on the street and say, "Excuse me, could you tell me if there are any fine dining restaurants nearby?" You are implying the passerby is a person of taste. If, however, you ask that same passerby, "Hey, know any down and dirty bars in this burg?" your implication is entirely different. Find a way to imply magnificent qualities of those you wish to indirectly compliment. Technique 53. Implied magnificence. Throw a few comments into your conversation that presuppose something positive about the person you're talking with. But be careful, don't blow it like the well-intentioned maintenance man, or the southern boy who, at the prom, thought he was flattering his date when he told her, "Gosh, Mary Lou, for a fat gal, you dance real good." Accidental adulation. Be an undercover complimenter. Next in our agglomeration of joy spreaders is a technique I call accidental adulation. Once, at a small dinner party, the subject turned to space travel. The gentleman seated to my right said, "Leil, you're much too young to remember this, but when Apollo 11 landed on the moon, if my life depended on it," I couldn't tell you what the chap said next. I simply remember smiling to myself and stretching to get a glimpse of my youthful self in the dining room mirror. Of course, I remember July 1969, like the rest of the world. I was glued to the television watching Neil Armstrong's size 9.5B boot hit the moon. However, I certainly was not thinking of moon travel at that dinner party. I was too busy reveling in the fact that this lovely man didn't think I was old enough to remember 1969. I assumed his opinion of my youthfulness just slipped out. Therefore, it must be sincere. Sure, now that I think about it, he probably knew darn well I was old enough to remember the moon landing. I bet he was using the maneuver I call accidental adulation, but it doesn't matter. My warm memories of him remain. Accidental adulation is slipping praise into the secondary part of your point, putting it in verbal parentheses. Try it. You'll like it. They'll love it. Try accidental adulation and see smiles break out on the faces of the recipients. Tell your 65-year-old uncle anyone as fit as you would have zipped right up those steps. But boy, was I out of breath. Tell a colleague. Because you're so knowledgeable in contract law, you would have read between the lines. But stupidly, I signed it. You run the danger, of course, that you will please the recipient so profoundly. With your parenthetical praise, he or she won't hear your main point. Technique 54. Accidental adulation. Become an undercover complimenter. Stealthily sneak praise into the parenthetical part of your sentence. Just don't try to quiz anyone later on your main point. The joyful jolt of your accidental adulation strikes them temporarily deaf to anything that follows. So far, we have explored 4 covert compliments: grapevine glory, carrier, pigeon, kudos, implied magnificence, and accidental adulation. There are times, of course, when blatant praise does work. The next techniques will hone your skills in this precarious but rewarding venture. The killer compliment. Knock 'em out in the first round. Would you like to have a little trick up your sleeve, potent enough to kick-start commerce, ignite a friendship, or even a love affair? I'll give you one, but only if you heed its warning label. You must register your tongue as a lethal weapon once you've mastered the following technique. It's called the killer compliment. It was born one night some years ago after my then roommate, Christine, and I had just returned home from a holiday party. As we were taking off our coats, she had a silly smile on her face and a faraway look in her eye. "Christine, are you okay?" I asked. "Oh yes," she purred. "I'm going to go out with that man." "Man? What man?" "Oh, you know," she said, chastising me for not knowing. "The one who told me I had beautiful teeth." Teeth. That night, I happened to walk by the bathroom door as Christine was getting ready for bed. I saw her grinning at herself in the mirror, tilting her head from side to side and brushing each individual tooth. All the while, she kept her eyes glued to the mirror, inspecting each one for the beauty her new admirer commented on. I realized the fellow who had given Christine the unusual compliment had made her day and had made a killer impression on her. Thus, the killer compliment came into being. What is the killer compliment? It is commenting on some very personal and specific quality you spot in someone. A killer compliment is not, "I like your tie," or "you're a very nice person." The first is not personal enough, and the second is not specific enough. A killer compliment is more like, "What exquisite eyes you have," very specific. Or, "You have a wonderful air of honesty about you," very personal. Because delivering your first killer compliment is difficult, I trick my seminar participants into pulling it off. About midway through the program, I'll ask them to close their eyes and think about a partner they had in an earlier exercise. Then I say, now recall one attractive physical quality or personality trait you observed in your partner, not one you would necessarily comment on. I caution. Perhaps your partner had a lovely smile or a twinkle in her eye. Perhaps he exuded a sense of calm or credibility. Got it in your mind? Then the thunderbolt. Okay, now go find your partner and tell them the nice quality you noticed. What? Tell them? The thought paralyzes them. One by one, however, they courageously seek their partners and deliver their killer compliments. As people hear a stranger tell them they have beautiful hands or penetrating brown eyes, joy fills the room. Laughter explodes in every corner. I am now looking out at a sea of smiles and happy blushes. Everyone loves receiving his or her personal killer compliment, and everyone develops friendly feelings toward the giver. Technique 55. The killer compliment. Whenever you are talking with a stranger you'd like to make part of your professional or personal future, search for one attractive, specific, and unique quality he or she has. At the end of the conversation, look them right in the eye, say their name, and proceed to curl their toes with the killer compliment. The killer compliment uses manual just like a cannon. If you don't use the killer compliment correctly, it can backfire. Here's the user's manual that comes with the mighty missile. Rule 1. Deliver your killer compliment to the recipient in private. If you are standing with a group of 4 or 5 people and you praise one woman for being fit, every other woman feels like a barrel of lard. If you tell one man he has wonderful carriage, every other feels like a hunchback. You also make the blushing recipient uncomfortable. Rule 2. Make your killer compliment credible. For example, I'm tone deaf. If I'm forced to sing even a simple song like Happy Birthday, I sound like a sick pig. If anyone in earshot were foolish enough to tell me they liked my voice, I'd know it was hogwash. Rule 3. Confer only one killer compliment per half year on each recipient. Otherwise, you come across as insincere, groveling, obsequious, pandering, and a thoroughly manipulative person. Not cool. With careful aim, the killer compliment captures everyone. It works best, however, when you use it judiciously on new acquaintances. If you want to praise friends every day, employ the next technique. Little strokes. Itty-bitty boosters. In contrast to the big guns of killer compliments for strangers and the tombstone game for loved ones, which we will learn shortly, here's a little pea shooter you can pop off at anyone, anytime. I call it little strokes. Little strokes are short, quick kudos you drop into your casual conversation. Make a liberal use of little strokes with your colleagues in the office. Nice job, John. Well done, Kyoto. Hey, not bad, Billy. I have one friend who uses a lovely little stroke. If I do something he likes, he says, not too shabby, Leil. You can also use little strokes on the everyday achievements of your loved ones. If your spouse just cooked a great meal, wow, you're the best chef in town. Just before going out together, gee honey, you look great. After a long drive, you did it. It must have been tiring. With your kids, hey gang, great job cleaning up your room. I once read a poignant Reader's Digest article about a little girl who often misbehaved. Her mother had to continually reprimand her. However, one day the little girl had been especially good and hadn't done a single thing that called for a reprimand. The mother said, that night, after I tucked her in bed and started downstairs, I heard a muffled noise. Running back up, I found her head buried in the pillow. She was sobbing. Between the sobs, she asked, Mummy, haven't I been a pretty good girl today? The question, the mother said, went through her like a knife. I had been quick to correct her, she said when she was wrong. But when she tried to behave, I hadn't noticed it, and I put her to bed without one word of appreciation. Adults are all grown up little girls and little boys. We may not go to bed sobbing if the people in our lives don't notice when we are good. Nevertheless, a trace of those tears lingers. Technique 56. Little strokes. Don't make your colleagues, your friends, your loved ones look at you and silently say, "Haven't I been pretty good today?" Let them know how much you appreciate them by caressing them with verbal little strokes like "nice job," "well done," "cool." Little things mean a lot. Little strokes are indeed little, but as every woman knows, they mean a lot. I've yet to meet a woman who wouldn't agree with these lyrics from an old song sung by Kitty Callan. Blow me a kiss from across the room. Say I look nice when I'm not. Touch my hair as you pass my chair. Little things mean a lot. Send me the warmth of a secret smile to show me you haven't forgot. For always and ever, now and forever, little things mean a lot. To further complicate the art of the compliment, one must consider timing. Blatant, barefaced, brazen flattery turns all but the blindest egomaniacs off. But the human animal never fails to amaze observers. There are moments when, if you don't give a blatant, barefaced, brazen compliment, even to a bright individual, you lose. The following technique defines those moments. The knee-jerk wow. Too little, too late. I'll never forget the first time I gave a luncheon speech in front of strangers. I'd practiced for the stuffed animals on my bed and my roommate Christine, but this was my debut in front of a real audience. As I shakily got to my feet, I looked out at 17 smiling Rotarians waiting for my words of wit and wisdom. My tongue was dry as chalk dust, my palms as wet as a fish. The audience might as well have been 17,000 judges waiting to sentence me to eternal humiliation if I didn't inform and entertain each. I gave a last panic-stricken glance at Christine, who had driven me to the club, and began, "Good afternoon. It gives me great pleasure." 30 minutes later, amid scattered applause which I feared was obligatory, I crawled back to my seat next to Christine. I looked expectantly at her. She smiled and said, "You know this dessert isn't bad. Have some." Dessert! Dessert! Damn it, Christine, how did I do? I silently screamed at her. A few minutes later, Christine told me how much she assumed everyone else enjoyed my talk. Nevertheless, by then it was too late. The crucial compliment craving moment had passed. Quick as a hiccup, you must compliment now. When the doctor sadistically smacks your knee with that nasty little rubber hammer, you instantly give a knee jerk. And when people make a coup, you must instantly hit them with a knee jerk wow. You were great. Say they've just successfully negotiated a deal, cooked a terrific Thanksgiving turkey, or sung a solo song at the birthday party. No matter whether their accomplishment is trivial or triumphant, you must praise it immediately. Not 10 minutes later, not 2 minutes later, immediately. The moment the winner walks out of the boardroom, the kitchen, the spotlight, there's only one sound the victor wants to hear. Wow. Technique 57. The knee-jerk wow. Quick as a blink. You must praise people the moment they finish a feat. In a wink, like a knee-jerk reaction, say, "You were terrific." Don't worry that they won't believe you. The euphoria of the moment has a strangely numbing effect on the achiever's objective judgment. But what if they really bombed? Are you asking me to lie? You ask. Yes. Absolutely, positively, resoundingly, yes. This is one of the few moments in life where a lie is condoned by the most ethical individuals. Big winners realize that sensitivity to an insecure performer's ego takes momentary precedence over their deep commitment to the truth. They also know when sanity returns to the recipient and they suspect they screwed up, it won't matter. He or she will retroactively appreciate your sensitivity and forgive your compassionate falsehood. We've talked a lot about giving compliments, both covert and overt. Now let's talk about a skill that for many is even harder: receiving them, boomeranging, a national weakness. I would like to dedicate the following technique to my French friends who contend the French are better at everything. Well, I concede one point. The French are indeed better at receiving compliments. I'll explain how shortly. Americans, unfortunately, are beastly at accepting adulation. If someone compliments you and you react clumsily out of embarrassment, you unwittingly start a vicious cycle. A friend ventures a compliment. He, smiling, "Hey, that's a nice dress you're wearing." She, frowning, "Oh, this old thing." He, thinking, "Whoops, she didn't seem to like hearing that. She thinks I have terrible taste to like that dress. I'd better keep my mouth shut." 3 weeks later, she, thinking grumpily, "He doesn't ever give me compliments anymore. What a bore." He, thinking gloomily, "What's her problem?" Girls don't like what? Several months ago, in one of my seminars, the group was discussing compliments. One fellow insisted that girls don't like compliments. "Girls don't like what?" I asked incredulously. He explained, "I once told a woman she had beautiful eyes. And she said, 'Boy, are you blind?' The poor chap was so wounded by her reaction, he became gun shy and had not aimed a compliment at a female since. What a shame for womankind, and what a blight on his social skills. Upon receiving a compliment, many people demur or proffer an embarrassed little thank you. Worse, they protest. Well, not really, but thanks anyway. Some people toss it off with just luck. When you react this way, you visit a grave injustice on the complimenter. You insult a well meaning person's powers of perception. Vous êtes gentil. Leave it to French folks to come up with a congenial catch all phrase. Upon receiving a compliment, they say, "Vous êtes gentil." Loosely translated, that is, "How kind of you." An American saying, "How kind of you," could sound stilted, like the little flower girl in My Fair Lady trying to be cultured. Nevertheless, we can express the French gentle sentiment with a technique I call boomeranging. When you toss a boomerang, it makes an almost 180-degree swerve in midair and soars back to land at the feet of the thrower. Likewise, when someone tosses a compliment your way, let the good feelings soar back to the tosser. Don't just say thanks, or worse, "Oh, it's nothing." Let them know of your gratitude and find a way to compliment them for their compliment. A few examples. She says, "I like those shoes." You say, "Oh, I'm so happy you told me. I just got them." He says, "You really did a good job on this project." You say, "Oh, that's so nice of you to tell me. I appreciate your positive feedback." You can also boomerang the good feelings back when people ask you a question about your family, a project, an event, or anything that shows they are interested in you. Your colleague asks, "How was your vacation in Hawaii?" You answer, "Oh, you remembered I went to Hawaii. It was great, thanks." Your boss asks, "Are you over your cold now?" You answer, "I appreciate your concern. I feel much better now." Whenever someone shines a little sunshine on your life in the form of a compliment or concerned question, reflect it back on the shiner. Technique 58. Boomeranging. Just as a boomerang flies right back to the thrower, let compliments boomerang right back to the giver. Like the French, quickly murmur something that expresses, "That's very kind of you." Incidentally, in that seminar, I decided to do womankind a favor by setting Malekine straight on compliments once and for all. I asked the fellow, who swore women hated praise, to give 3 women sitting near him a sincere compliment. He chose the woman with the beautiful silver hair sitting behind him, the girl with the hands like a pianist to his left, and the lady with the lovely deep blue eyes on his right. He told them all. 3 women waltzed out of the room that night, feeling a little better about themselves than when they walked in. And I hope for all the women he would yet meet in his life. One man left with a changed attitude about compliments. As we come to the end of our exploration of praise, I want to make sure you're aiming dead center for people's hearts. Whether you're giving little carrier pigeon kudos or laying a killer compliment on your conversation partner, this next technique keeps you on target. The tombstone game, the ultimate praise for someone near and dear. Do you remember when you were a kid, the hundreds of times our parents' friends asked, "And what do you want to be when you grow up?" That was our cue to regale our adoring audience with dreams of being a ballerina, a firefighter, a nurse, a cowboy, or a movie star. Well, most of our lives wound up being a little closer to butcher, baker, or candlestick maker. Nevertheless, we all still have fantasies of our own greatness. Even though most of us cashed in our childhood dreams of being the star we thought we'd be, so we could make some money. We all know that deep down, we are very, very, very special. We say to ourselves, maybe the world will little note nor long remember how brilliant, how wonderful, how witty, how creative or caring I really am. However, those who truly know and love me, they will recognize my greatness, my magic, my specialness over all other ordinary mortals. When we find people with the supernatural powers of perception to recognize our remarkableness, we become addicted to the heady drug of their appreciation. Praising someone you know and love requires a different set of skills from complimenting a stranger. The formula to bring someone even closer to you personally or professionally follows. I call it the tombstone game. It requires a little setup. Step 1: in a quiet moment chatting with your friend, your loved one, or your business partner, tell him or her you were reading something the other day about, of all things, tombstones. The piece was about, you say, what people fantasize inscribed above their grave after they die. You learned that people want the quality they are most proud of in life etched in stone. Then say, the variety is surprising. Everyone has a different self image, a different deep source of pride. Examples: here lies John Doe. He was a brilliant scientist. Here lies Diane Smith. She was a caring woman. Here lies Billy Bucks. By golly, he could make people laugh. Here lies Jane Wilson. She spread joy wherever she went. Here lies Harry Jones. He lived life his way. Step 2: reveal to your partner what you would like carved on your tombstone. Be serious about your revelation to encourage him or her to do likewise. Step 3: now you pop the question, you know, Joe, when all is said and done, what are you most proud of? What would you like the world to most remember about you? What would you want the world to see carved on your tombstone? Perhaps your business partner Joe says, well, I guess I'd sort of like people to know that I'm a man of my word. Listen carefully. If he expounds on it, take note of every nuance. Then file it away in your heart and don't say a word about it again. Joe will forget you ever played the tombstone game with him. Step 4: let at least 3 weeks pass. Then, whenever you want to improve the relationship, Feed the information back to your partner in the form of a compliment. Say, Joe, you know the reason I really appreciate being in business with you is because you're a man of your word? Wow, that hits Joe like a 747 out of the sky. Finally, he says to himself, someone who appreciates me for who I really am. Telling him you admire him for the same reason he admires himself has an impact on Joe like no other compliment in the world. Now, suppose your friend is Billy Bucks, the one who wanted his wit carved on his tombstone. You'd say, Billy, old buddy, you're terrific. I loves you cause you can really make people laugh. I love you because you fill in the blank. Suppose your significant other is Jane Wilson in the preceding example. Tell your beloved, Jane, I love you because you spread joy wherever you go. Suppose your life partner is Harry Jones. You take his hand and say, Harry, I love you because you live life your way. Blam! You have found that tender spot where the heart and the ego blend. Technique 59. The Tombstone Game. Ask the important people in your life what they would like engraved on their tombstone. Chisel it into your memory, but don't mention it again. Then, when the moment is right to say, I appreciate you or I love you, fill the blanks with the very words they gave you weeks earlier. You take people's breath away when you feed their deepest self-image to them in a compliment. At last, they say to themselves, someone who loves me for who I truly am. Tombstone game compliments are not interchangeable. Billy Bucks might not appreciate your calling him a man of his word. Billy's thing is humor. Jane might not value your thinking she lives life her way. Her source of pride is spreading joy wherever she goes. It's wonderful to tell people you appreciate or love them when it matches what they appreciate or love about themselves. The effect is overpowering. Part 7. Direct dial their hearts. How to be a hit in another show. Hundreds of people have formed impressions of you through that little device on your desk, your bed table, your kitchen wall, and they've never actually met you. They've never seen your smiles, felt your frowns. They've never grasped your hand or enjoyed your hugs. They've never read your body language or seen how you dress. Everything they know about you came through tiny filaments, sometimes from hundreds of miles away. But they feel they know you just from the sound of your voice. That's how powerful the telephone is. Powerful, yes, but not always accurate. For years, I dealt with my travel agent only by phone. Rani, my faceless agent, whom I'd never met in person, got me rock bottom prices on airfares, cars, and hotels. But her snippy phone personality really ticked me off. A dozen times, I vowed to find another agent. One Monday morning, several years ago, I received bad news and had to book an immediate flight home for a family emergency. There was no time to wait in line at the airport. So I jumped in a cab and asked the driver to wait in front of the travel agency while I grabbed tickets and a boarding pass. Like a lit fuse, I zipped into Rani's agency for the first time. The woman sitting at the front desk, seeing my frenzied rush, sympathetically jumped up. She gave me a reassuring smile and asked how she could help me. As I blithered on about my need for an emergency ticket, she smiled, nodded, and lunged immediately into action. What a terrific lady, I thought as she printed out the tickets. Moments later, darting out gratefully, grasping the tickets in my fist, I called out over my shoulder, "By the way, what's your name?" "Leil, I'm Rani," she said. I whirled around and saw a thoroughly congenial woman with a big smile on her face waving to wish me a safe trip. I was dumbfounded. Why had I previously thought she was so snippy? Rani was, well, so nice. Sitting back in the cab on the way to the airport, I figured it all out. Rani's friendliness, her warm smile, her nods, her good eye contact, her body language, her I'm here for you attitude were all silent signals that didn't travel through wires. I closed my eyes and tried to remember the voice I had heard moments ago. Yes, it was Rani's same crisp, curt pronunciation, but her friendly body language made her seem like a different person from the brusque agent I'd dealt with on the phone. Rani's phone personality and her demeanor in person were completely different shows. I realize it's the same with all of us. Your personality, mine, and everyone's could be likened to a show, a theatrical performance. You want to make sure yours is a box office smash, not a flop. The following 10 techniques will get your phone personality rave reviews. Talking gestures. Make your manner fit the medium. I have a friend, Tina, who designed costumes for an off-Broadway show that became a smash hit last year. The tiny show was such a critical success, it won the heart of an angel, a backer, and it went to Broadway. There, the show laid a big fat egg. When I read the bad news, I called Tina. Tina, why did the show get such bad reviews on Broadway? Tina told me that, sadly, the director didn't insist the actors and actresses change their performances to adapt to the new surroundings. The actors' understated movements, which moved small audiences alternately to laughter and tears, were lost in the big Broadway house. Audiences couldn't see their subtle gestures and poignant facial expressions. Tina told me the performers neglected to make their movements much bigger to fit the new medium. That excellent advice is not just for actors. Whenever you are talking, you must consider your medium. If your face were on a big movie screen, you might get your message across with a wink or an eyebrow raise. On radio, however, that would be meaningless. Because listeners couldn't see your wink, you'd have to say something like, "Hi, cutie." Because listeners couldn't see your raised eyebrows, you'd have to say, "Wow, I'm surprised." Your body language and facial expressions comprise more than half your personality. When people don't see you, they can get an entirely wrong impression, as I did with Rani. To get your personality across on the phone, you must translate your emotions into sound. In fact, you have to exaggerate the sound because studies have shown people lose 30% of the energy level in their voices on the phone. Say you meet an important new contact tomorrow. When you're introduced, you shake her hand. You fully face her. You make good, strong eye contact and let a sincere smile flood over your face. You even nod and smile, listening intently as she speaks. She likes you a lot, but how good an impression could you make on that VIP if both you and she were blindfolded and the two of you had your hands tied behind your backs? That's the handicap you suffer on the phone. If she couldn't see you, you'd have to substitute words to let her know you're agreeing or listening. You'd have to somehow verbalize that you're smiling and use her name more to replace the eye contact. You'd be using the technique I call talking gestures. To make up for your missing eye contact, punctuate your phone conversations with a huh or I hear you. So your listener knows you're nodding in approval. Verbalize, I see. Oh, that's great. No kidding. Interesting. And tell me more. She didn't see you hitting your head in surprise. Better say what a surprise. Or you don't say. He just said something impressive and he can't see your look of admiration. Try that was wise of you or you're no dummy. Of course, you need a big verbal smile in your repertoire. Try oh, wow, that's funny. Obviously, you're going to choose phrases that match your personality and the situation. Just make sure your phone listeners hear your emotions. Technique 60. Talking gestures. Think of yourself as the star of a personal radio drama every time you pick up the phone. If you want to come across as engaging as you are, you must turn your smiles into sound, your nods into noise, and all your gestures into something your listener can hear. You must replace your gestures with talk. Then punch up the whole act 30%. Name shower, a verbal caress when you're not sitting across from each other, resting your elbows on the same desk, your forks on the same table, or your heads on the same pillow. You need a substitute for intimacy. How can you create closeness when the two of you are hundreds of miles apart? How can you make the person you're talking to on the phone feel special when you can't pat their back or give them a little hug? The answer is simple. Just use your caller's name far more often than you would in person. In fact, shower your conversations with his or her name. When your listener hears it, it's like receiving a verbal caress. Thanks, Sam. Let's do it, Betty. Hey, Dimitri, why not? It's really been good talking to you, Kathy. Saying a person's name too often in face-to-face conversation sounds manipulative. However, on the phone, the effect is dramatically different. If you heard someone say your name, even if you were being jostled around in a big noisy crowd, you'd perk up and listen. Likewise, when your phone partner hears his or her own name coming through the receiver, it commands attention and recreates the familiarity the phone robs from you. If your listener is drifting, it brings him right back. If she's opening mail, she stops. If he's picking his teeth, he pulls the pick out. When you say someone's name on the phone, it's like yanking the person into the room with you. Technique 61. Name shower. People perk up when they hear their own name. Use it more often on the phone than you would in person to keep their attention. Your caller's name recreates the eye contact, the caress you might give in person. Saying someone's name repeatedly when face-to-face sounds pandering, but because there is physical distance between you on the phone, sometimes you're a continent apart. You can spray your conversation with it. Oh wow, it's you. Who wants to be a Cheshire cat? Burring. No matter whether you hear the ring in the boardroom, the bedroom, or the bathroom. Self-styled telephone experts tell you, smile before answering. Some pros even suggest you perch a mirror right next to your phone to monitor your grin. Been there, done that, doesn't work. One evening, in the middle of my weekly mud-pack facial, the phone rang. The horror of seeing myself in the phone mirror made my voice as hideous as my face. I immediately trashed the pro's advice along with the mirror. Who wants to sound like a dizzy Pollyanna? A no-brain Cheshire cat? A lonely recluse whose life is so dull that the big thrill of the day is a phone call? Any phone call? From anybody. Big winners don't smile before answering. They put a smile in their voices after they hear who is on the line. That's when it counts. Answer the phone unemotionally, professionally. Say your name or the name of your company. Then when you hear who is on the line, the little trick is to let a big smile flood over your face. Oh Joe, smile. How nice to hear from you. Sally, smile. How are you? Bill, smile. I was hoping it would be you. I have a friend, Steve, in Washington, D.C., who heads a major trade association that lobbies on Capitol Hill. Whenever I call Steve, I never know which of his dozens of assistants is going to answer. Nevertheless, whoever answers gives me the same warm response. First, they say Cable Telecommunications Association, their name, and how may I direct your call. No fake friendliness, no prefab smiles in their voices. I am sure they're not beaming back at themselves in any mirror. When I say, is Mr. Ephros available? This is Leil Lowndes calling. That's when they become super friendly. Oh yes, Miss Lowndes, they purr, definitely. Let me put you right through. Wow, does that make me feel special? As I'm waiting for Steve to come to the phone, I fantasize him sitting at the head of a long mahogany table in his weekly staff meeting. I can just hear him instructing his staff. Now, if the president or some higher ups in the White House call, put them right through. Oh, and of course, if that important woman, Leil Lowndes, calls, put her right through too. While visiting Washington last year, I had lunch with Steve. I took the opportunity to tell him what a pleasure it was to call his office and how I appreciated his staff's warm phone reception. I thanked him for familiarizing each with my name and mentioning I might be calling from time to time. Steve looked across the table at me and blinked. Leil, he said, you teach telephone skills. Haven't you caught on? Huh? Forgive me if I'm bursting a bubble, Steve said, but everyone gets that reception no matter who's calling. Oh! When a pain in the neck calls but Steve, I protested, when I'd recuperated from the initial disappointment that I was a victim of a technique and not a VIP. What if the caller is unknown? A complete stranger? Surely your staffers shouldn't fake they know the caller. Of course not, Leil. In that case, I instruct them to show energy and enthusiasm over the reason they're calling. For example, suppose the caller is a cable operator wanting to join our association. The caller would get a smile and a sincere, "Oh yes, Mr. Smith, I'll put you right through." Yeah, but suppose the caller is selling office furniture, I challenged. Doesn't matter, Steve said. The salesperson gets the same reception after the staffer hears why he's calling. If my staffer says warmly, "Oh, office furniture," the caller feels good, and I find the salesperson is a lot easier to deal with later. I told him, "Okay, Steve, starting tomorrow morning, I'm going to put that, 'Oh wow, I'm so happy you called for that reason' attitude in my voice." The next morning, the first call was my dentist's office. "Miss Lowndes, this call is to remind you you're overdue for your 6-month checkup." "Oh, of course, you're so right," I cooed. "I'm so glad you called." The receptionist sounded surprised but very pleased at my reaction. "I can't book an appointment right now," I continued, "but I'll call you as soon as my schedule frees up." She didn't hassle me with her usual, "Well, when do you expect that to be?" She just hung up satisfied. And I got what I wanted. No call from my dentist's office for at least another 6 months. The second time the phone rang, it was a man who had ordered my tape set, calling to complain that one of the tapes broke. "Oh my goodness, I'm so glad you told me about that," I said with the enthusiasm of having won the lottery. The caller sounded a little shocked, but obviously pleased at my reaction. "Of course, I'll get another set out to you, and I hope you accept my apologies." Caller hung up satisfied. And I got what I wanted, his goodwill and word of mouth in spite of my tape duplicator's blooper. The third call was tougher. This was from a vendor I had completely forgotten to pay. "Oh, I'm so glad you reminded me of that bill," I lied. Again, shocked pleasure was the caller's reaction. I was probably the first creditor in history who ever sounded happy she'd called. In the back of my mind, I felt there was one bill I had overlooked. I'm writing the check as we speak. Then I got my reward. The donor said, "By the way, don't worry about the 2% per month late payment charge. As long as we get your check by the end of the week, it will be okay." She hung up happy. And I got a present. No finance charges in spite of my oversight. And so it went throughout the rest of the day, the rest of the week, and ever since. Try it. You'll find you get a lot more from anyone when you smile, after you find out who it is or why they're calling. Use the "Oh wow, it's you" technique on almost every call. Technique 62. "Oh wow, it's you." Don't answer the phone with an "I'm just so happy all the time" attitude. Answer warmly, crisply, professionally. Then after you hear who is calling, Let a huge smile of happiness engulf your entire face and spill over into your voice. You make your caller feel as though your giant, warm, fuzzy smile is reserved for him or her. The sneaky screen. No, no, not the screen. Picture a torture device called the screen. The mad scientist, laughing maniacally, forces the victim into a giant meat grinder that mashes him through a heavy metal screen. It slices his body into a million molecules before he's reconstituted on the other side. Being screened when you call someone's office is the emotional version of that ordeal. You place your cold call. May I speak to Mr. Jones? You pleasantly ask. Who's calling? A haughty voice responds. Of course, your name is not prestigious enough for the screener to grant you the exalted status of speaking to Jones. Her ruthless interrogation continues. And what company are you with? You submit your company's name, praying it will score with her. And then to top it off, she has the pluck to ask, and what's this in reference to? Several weeks after my luncheon with Steve, I had the occasion to call him again. Is Steve Efros available? This is Leil Lowndes calling. Oh yes, Miss Lowndes, definitely. Let me put you right through. I start humming happily as I wait for Steve to come to the line. A moment later, his assistant came back and said sympathetically, I'm so sorry, Miss Lowndes. Steve just stepped out to lunch. I know he'll be sorry he missed your call. Meanwhile, I'm still smiling. Do I suspect that Steve didn't just step out to lunch? Do I suspect he's sitting right there? Do I ever, in my wildest paranoid dreams, think he doesn't have the time or inclination to talk to me? Do I feel screened? No way. I'm as happy as a carefree kitten as I leave my number for a callback. You see, I have probably fallen for the sneaky screen. Technique 63. The sneaky screen. If you must screen your calls, instruct your staff to first say cheerfully, oh yes, I'll put you right through. May I tell her who's calling? If the party has already identified himself, it's oh of course Mr. Who's It, I'll put you right through. When the secretary comes back with the bad news that Mr. or Miss Bigwig is unavailable, callers don't take it personally and never feel screened. They fall for it every time, just like I did. Salute the spouse, the power behind the phone. I know a secret about a big cat who owns an international hotel chain with properties in 6 countries. He hires and fires thousands, awards, or pulls immense contracts, borrows from major financial institutions, and makes lavish contributions to charities. Mr. Big Cat, we'll call him Ed, has a respected and immediately recognizable name in his industry. And here's the secret. Mrs. Big Cat is the real brains behind the operation. I became friends with Mrs. Big Cat, we'll call her Sylvia, when I did some consulting for her husband's organization. Sylvia invited me to tea one afternoon. She sweetly apologized that this was maid's day off, so we'd have to fend for ourselves. As we happily perched on the patio and were about to dive into our tea and crumpets, the phone rang. She excused herself to answer it. I heard Mrs. Big Cat say, "No, I'm sorry, he's not in." Shall I tell him who called? No, I don't know when he is planning on returning, but if you give me your name and... No, I said I don't know what time he'll be back. Yes, I'll tell him you called. As Sylvia returned to the patio, I could... She was annoyed by the call. Always on the lookout for a good phone story, I ventured a questioning look. Picking up on my curiosity, she said, "That fool thinks he's going to get a contribution from Ed." Ha! She laughed wryly. Her candor emboldened me to ask her more. It turns out the caller, a Mr. Creighton, was a fundraiser for a major charity Ed was considering contributing to. My hostess said Creighton had called twice in the past 2 weeks when Ed was out. And not once did he greet me, ask how I was, or apologize for the disturbance. This did not please Mrs. Big Cat. Was it a major irritation for Mrs. Big Cat? No, only minor. But did it mean a major loss for the little cat who called? It sure did. In Ed and Sylvia's Big Cat household, subtleties count. At the dinner table, Mrs. Big Cat could say to her husband, "A very nice man named Creighton called for you today, dear." Or she might say, "A rather irritating chap named Creighton called for you today." One comment or the other could mean millions won or lost by Creighton's charity. And all because little cat, Creighton mildly ruffled Mrs. Big Cat's whiskers. Technique 64. Salute the spouse. Whenever you are calling someone's home, always identify and greet the person who answers. Whenever you call someone's office more than once or twice, make friends with the secretary. Anybody who is close enough to answer the phone is close enough to sway the VIP's opinion of you. Home advice: salute the spouse. Office advice: salute the secretary. A surprising number of Big Cat spouses and secretaries have deep claws into important business decisions. When it comes to hiring time, firing time, promoting time, or buying time, many spouses have a say. When it comes to whose calls get through, whose proposals get put on the top of the boss's desk, who gets luncheon appointments made, secretaries' opinions count. Only foolish callers don't realize all spouses and secretaries have names. All spouses and secretaries have lives. All spouses and secretaries have feelings. All spouses and secretaries have influence. Deal accordingly. What color is your time? Are you red, yellow, or green? When Alexander Graham Bell invented the phone, he and his comrades had no use for such trite phrases as "Hi, how you doing?" Bell and his boys never just started spouting their ideas into their listeners' ears. The first words out of their mouths in those times were, "Can you talk?" Bell and his buddies were, of course, referring to technical capabilities. Little did they know, more than 100 years later, big winners would use a form of that same greeting. Today, of course, "Can you talk?" means "Is it convenient to talk?" Before launching into conversation, they always ask, "Is this a good time to chat?" Did I catch you at a good time? Do you have a minute to discuss the widget account? All folks have a big Ben in their brain that determines how receptive they are going to be to you and your ideas. When you mess with their internal cuckoo clock, they won't listen to you. No matter how interesting your information or how pleasant your call, bad timing means bad results for you. It's not your fault. Whenever you call someone at home, you never know whether she was sleeping or whether there's a fire raging in the kitchen stove. Whenever you call someone at work, you never know whether he's got 2 hours to get a report in or whether the big boss is not so patiently sitting on his desk. Whenever you place a call, always, not occasionally, not frequently, always ask about your timing. Make it a habit. Make it a rule. Make it a self-punishable crime if the first words out of your mouth don't concern the convenience of your timing. "Hi Joe, is this a good time to talk?" "Hello Susan, have you got a minute?" "Hi Carl, did I catch you good or did I catch you bad?" "Sam, do you have a second for me to tell you about what happened at the game last Saturday?" There are many ways to say it, but it all boils down to, is this a good time to talk? My friend Barry, a broadcaster, accomplishes more in a day than most people do in a week. He came up with a clever conversational device that assures he'll never shatter anyone's emotional sundial. He calls it, "What color is your time?" Barry introduces the device by telling people he's calling he has great respect for their time. He then asks permission to start his future conversations with a question that assures he'll never disturb them at an inopportune moment. Barry says he's going to ask what color their time is. They should honestly answer red, yellow, or green. Red means I'm really rushed. Yellow means I'm busy, but what's on your mind? If it's quick, we can deal with it. Green means sure. I've got time. Let's talk. Red, like the stoplight at the corner, means stop. Yellow means hurry up. Time is short, or stop and wait for the next green light. Green means go. Busy people pick up quickly on his artful device and enjoy the game. Most especially, they enjoy Barry's sensitivity and respect for their time. In fact, he says most of his callers play the same sensitive game when they call him. Hi Barry, what color is your time? Are you green? Technique 65. What color is your time? No matter how urgent you think your call, always begin by asking the person about timing. Either use the what color is your time device or simply ask, is this a convenient time for you to talk? When you ask about timing first, you'll never smash your footprints right in the middle of your telephone partner's sands of time. You'll never get a no. Just because your timing wasn't right. Sales folks, wait for the green light. A note here for salespeople. If you ask a prospect if he or she has time to talk and the answer is, not really. But tell me what's on your mind. Don't. Do not make your sales pitch while they're red. Do not talk with them when they're yellow. Wait until they're green, very green. If you ever want to see any green coming from them, that is. Constantly changing outgoing message. Whoops, your paranoia is showing you can tell a lot about people just from the outgoing messages they leave on their voicemail. Hello? His machine answers. I'm not in right now, but you probably don't want to talk to me anyway. Beep. Would you suspect this fellow has an inferiority complex? Hello? Her machine answers. The sound you hear is the barking of our killer, Doberman Pinscher, Wolf. Please leave a message after the tone. Beep. Would you suspect this woman is worried about break-ins? Most of us don't record our personal foibles so conspicuously for the world to hear. Nevertheless, people can hear a lot between the lines of what we say on our voicemail. Last month, I needed a graphic artist to do some work for one of my extremely conservative clients. I phoned Mark, an artist whose work I had seen and liked a lot. His answering machine blasted ear-splitting rock music through the receiver. Then his voice boomed over the electric guitar. Hey there, dude, don't be crude. Just croon me an earful of sweet sounds right at that lone tone. Yeah. Beep. I banged the receiver quickly back into the cradle to shut out horrible fantasies of how my client would react if he had to call Mark. His 30-second talent show might have been an appropriate sample of a rock musician's talent. But a business person should opt for a more sedate, outgoing message. The message you leave on your answering machine reflects your work. Keep yours friendly, neutral, and up to date. And here's the secret. To give the impression you are really on top of your business, change your message every day. Studies show that callers perceive people to be brighter and more efficient when they hear an updated message each time they call. If appropriate, let callers know where you are and when you intend to be back. If you have customers who need to be attended to, this is crucial. Try something like this on your office phone. This is name. It's Thursday, May 7th, and I'll be in a sales meeting until late this afternoon. Please leave your message and I'll get back to you as soon as I return. That way, if you don't call a client back until 4 p.m., he isn't steaming. Also, keep it short. Some people change their message every day, but it's too long. I had a colleague, a public speaker named Dan, who, in his finest, mellifluous voice, imposed his thought for the day on all unsuspecting callers. Last year, I was working on a project with Dan and had to call him 3 times in the same day to leave a progress report. Each time, his machine answered, "Hello, this is Dan, and here's my daily motivator." He cleared his throat for his big recorded performance and then continued, "Did someone say something today that offended you? So what? That's their problem." He paused dramatically. "Did someone look at you the wrong way? So what? That's their problem." Again, a pause for the magnitude of that sentiment to sink in. Replace your petty thoughts of anger, exasperation, and spite with thoughts of strength. Calm down. Rise above those little insignificant irritations in life. Focus your thoughts in the direction of fulfillment and accomplishment. Once again, this is Dan. I'm surprised he didn't also leave his agent's phone number here. Leave your message at the tone and have a great, peaceful day. Beep. The first time I listened to Dan's inspirational message, the length mildly irritated me. The second time I found myself hyperventilating while waiting for him to get through his unbearably long message. By the third call, his schmaltzy message seemed interminable. I was filled with those petty thoughts of anger, exasperation, and spite he warned against because of his darn message. I found it impossible to rise above it and focus my thoughts in the direction of fulfillment and accomplishment. I wanted to punch him in the nose. Outgoing messages are not the venues to give inspirational messages, nor to impress the world with one's accomplishments. Another friend of mine, a writer, earned herself a few little cat stripes with this one on her machine. "Hello, this is Cheryl Smith. Cheryl is on her national book tour." She paused, so all callers could be appropriately impressed, making appearances in 12 cities. Another pause as though awaiting applause. "She'll be returning on October the 7th. What's this she bit?" Cheryl herself is speaking. "Please leave your message for her at the tone." Beep. "Yes, Cheryl, we know you're an important author. But your third-party reference to self, your narcissistic tone of voice, and topping it off with 12 cities would make any big cat snicker through his whiskers. One last codicil. Avoid one particular message many business people use these days. I'm either away from my desk or on the other line. The subtext of this message is I must lay chained to my desk, and it is an amazing fact that I have escaped for the moment. One night, I was working into the wee hours. At 4 a.m., I decided to leave a message on a colleague's business phone so she'd get it as soon as she came in at 9. "Hello," the message chirped. "This is Felicia. I'm either away from my desk or on the other line right now, but leave your message at the tone." Beep. "Felicia, of course you're away from your desk. It's 4 a.m. on Sunday morning." On the other line. "At this hour? I hope not. You never know how your message is going to affect someone. Just keep yours neutral, friendly, constantly changing, short and understated. No bows, no bells, no whistles." Technique 66. Constantly changing outgoing message. If you want to be perceived as conscientious and reliable, leave a short, professional, and friendly greeting as your outgoing message. No music, no jokes, no inspirational messages, no bows, bells, or whistles. And here's the secret: change it every day. Your message doesn't have to be flawless. A little cough or stammer gives a lovely, unpretentious reality to your message. Your 10-second audition. Next! Producers of big Broadway musicals can be brutal during auditions. An anxious wannabe star After rehearsing his audition song for weeks, steps on stage. He opens his mouth to sing. After a few notes, the heartless producer shouts, "Thank you! Next!" Dreams of stardom dashed in 10 seconds. Business people's professional dreams can also be dashed in the first 10 seconds of their audition. Their audition is the message they leave on someone else's answering machine. Competent business people wouldn't dream of sending a messy, handwritten business letter to a VIP on cheap yellow stained paper and expect a response. They know the recipient would toss it in the bin. Nevertheless, some of these same folks will leave a lackluster message on a VIP's voicemail and expect a call back. No one ever told them that big winners scrutinize messages on their voicemail with the same consideration of a big Broadway producer. If you sound good, you've got a chance. If you don't, you are fast forwarded out of their life. Salespeople, suitors, candidates, and competitors who leave crisp, intelligent, upbeat messages on voicemail get called back. Losers with lackluster tones and uncrafted messages never hear from Mr. or Miss Make It Happen. Make sure your message reflects 3 C's: confidence, clarity, and credibility. In addition, make it entice, entertain, or interest the listener. A flat "This is Joe, call me back" doesn't score with big winners. Stay tuned for radio DJs use tricks to keep their listeners tuned in. Top salespeople have similar little tricks to entice prospects to call them back. Here's one called a cliffhanger, to make sure listeners won't switch stations during the radio commercial. The broadcaster throws out a mini mystery, and right after the commercial, we'll be back with the winning ticket. It could be yours. Stay tuned. Whenever you leave a voicemail message for anyone, try to include a cliffhanger. "Hi Harry, this is Andrew. I have the answer to that question you asked me last week." Or "Hi Diane, this is Betsy. I have some big news about that project we were discussing." Now Harry and Diane have a reason to call Andrew and Betsy back. Pitch personality into your message too. Picture the people listening to it. Say something to pique their curiosity or make them smile. The message you leave is your 10-second audition. Make it good. Technique 67. Your 10-second audition while dialing, clear your throat. If an answering machine picks up, pretend the beep is a big Broadway producer saying next. Now you're on. This is your 10-second audition to prove you are worthy of a quick callback. Incidentally, if someone's voicemail unexpectedly comes on and you are unprepared, quickly hang up before the beep so they don't get a hang-up message. Take a moment to craft your entertaining, enticing, or interesting message. Rehearse it once with confidence, clarity, and charisma. Then redial to leave your great hot message. A funny thing happens. If your party answers this time, you'll be disappointed. The ho-hum caper, ho-hum business as usual. The inspiration for this next telephone technique comes from personal experiences with mid-Manhattan toilets, a less than refined origin to be sure. New York City, in spite of all its reputed sophistication, lags behind some of the shabbiest European cities in one respect. Manhattan has few public toilets, and none of those European-style, charming, and at times very much appreciated freestanding structures on street corners. In the days when I made sales calls around the busy city of New York, this presented a problem. Several times a day, I often found myself at the mercy of coffee shop cashiers who jealously guarded their restroom facilities. Some shops even put menacingly scribbled signs in the window. "Bathrooms are for customers only." I often found that if I played it straight, going up to the cashier and asking if I could use the amenities, I'd get shot down. So I used the following technique. Without casting a glance at the cashier, I'd strut confidently into the coffee shop. I'd march right past the bathroom bouncer and keep my gaze fixed on one of the booths. She'd assume I was coming for lunch or had simply returned to collect my forgotten gloves. Once past the gatekeeper of the loo, I'd wait for her to be busy ringing up the next check. Then, like greased lightning, I'd sprint into the John. I dubbed this deception the ho hum caper after my feigned attitude of ho hum, business as usual. I come here every day with nothing on my mind but lunch. Let us now translate that sneaky subterfuge into a seldom fail phone technique. You can use the maneuver to sneak around secretaries and dodge their heartless screening. Instead of playing it straight and asking for your party by name, just say, "Is he in?" Or "Is she in?" Using the pronoun is verbally sprinting past the secretary with a business as usual, ho hum, I call everyday attitude. Technique 68. The ho hum caper, instead of using your party's name, casually let the pronoun he or she roll off your tongue. Forget her. "May I speak to Miss Big Shot, please?" Just announce, "Hi, Bob Smith here. Is she in?" Tossing the familiar she off your tongue signals to the secretary that you and her boss are old buddies. I hear your other line. Do you really have to take care of that fire in your kitchen? Whenever you're on the phone with someone, you hear a lot more than their voices. In the background, you might hear dogs barking, babies crying, or a crackling sound. For all you know, the dog has his tail caught in the refrigerator, the baby has to be fed, or the house is on fire. When you acknowledge the sound by asking if they have to take care of it, you warm the hearts of your listeners. When you are talking to someone at work, you often hear another phone ringing. Say immediately, "I hear your other line." Do you have to answer it? Even if not, he or she will appreciate the gesture. If he does have to catch the other call, you can be sure he heard nothing you said after the first ring. He's only thinking, "How can I interrupt this babbling person without being rude so I can answer my other phone?" In fact, with every barring, irritation sets in that you are holding him hostage from doing what he has to do. Here is the technique guaranteed to save you from being in that uncomfortable position. Technique 69. I hear your other line. When you hear a phone in the background, stop speaking, in mid-sentence if necessary, and say, "I hear your other line." Or your dog barking, your baby crying, your spouse calling you. Ask whether she has to attend to it. Whether she does or not, she'll know you're a top communicator for asking. The subtext, of course, is that you are sensitive to what's going on in your caller's world. If you're talking to someone far away or in another country. Another way to show your tops in the communications department is to translate time references into their time zone. When you leave a message, say, "I can be reached between 3 and 5 your time." And don't forget foreign holidays. Last July 1st, I was on the phone with a client from Australia. I was impressed when he wished me happy Independence Day weekend. So impressed, in fact, I ran out to find a chart of international holidays. I made a note in my calendar next April 25th to wish my Aussie friend happy Anzac Day, after I figure out what it means. If you do business with people around the world, be sure to extend good wishes to them for their holidays. Forget about your own if they're not shared. I'm still mortified about the time last November when I was on a conference call with a Canadian client and 7 of his salespeople. I wished them all happy Thanksgiving. Instant replay. It's much better the second time around. The first time I saw The Wizard of Oz, the story bewitched me. The second time I saw The Wizard of Oz, the special effects amazed me. The third time I saw The Wizard of Oz, the photography dazzled me. Have you ever seen a movie twice, 3 times? you notice subtleties and hear sounds you completely missed the first time around. It's the same on the phone. Because your business conversations are more consequential than movies, you should listen to them 2, maybe 3 times. Often, we have no clear idea of what really happened in our phone conversation until we hear it again. You'll find shadings more significant than the color of Toto's collar, and more scarecrows than you imagined who haven't got a brain. How do you listen to your important business conversations again? Simply legally and ethically tape record them. I call the technique of recording and analyzing your business conversations for subtleties instant replay. Having a tape recorder on her phone could have made a dramatic difference in the career of my friend Laura. Laura, a nutritionist, had developed an excellent health drink. It deserved to be marketed nationally. I was in Laura's office one day discussing her plans, and I said, "Laura, I've got just the contact for you." Several months earlier, I had met Fred, a man who owned a chain of supermarkets. Fred owed me a favor because, at his request, I'd given a pro bono talk for a social club he belonged to. Fred was a big banana in the supermarket world, and with 1 year, he could put my friend's health drink in his stores. That would launch Laura nationally. I placed the call, and lo and behold, he was in. And an even bigger, lo and behold, Fred sounded interested in Laura's beverage. "Put her on," Fred said. I proudly handed Laura the phone, and their conversation started out fine. "Oh, sure. I'll send you a sample," Laura said. "What's the address?" Then I heard Laura say, "Wait a minute. Let me get something to write with." I rapidly rolled a pen and pushed a pad in front of her nose. What's that again? Did you say 4,201 or 4,102? I moan inaudibly. "And how do you spell the name of this street?" My moan becomes audible. Whoops, this pen just ran out of ink. "Leil, do you see another pen on my desk?" I did, and this time I felt like throwing it at her. "Sorry, what's that again?" Yikes, now I wanted to grab the phone out of Laura's hands. She shouldn't be bothering a busy big banana for details like repeating addresses. She could have called his secretary back later for clarification. But even that would have been unnecessary if she were recording the conversation with the technique I call instant replay. She could have merely mentioned that she was flipping on the recorder. Most heavy hitters are comfortable with that concept, and she would have had it on tape. Fred was nice to Laura that day, but my friend never heard back from him, and to this day she wonders why. She'll never know the confused phone exchange nixed the deal. Was Fred being unfair just because Laura was a little slow on the phone? Absolutely not. Fred figures, if this woman is as insensitive about my time at the beginning of a possible business relationship, what's she going to be like down the pike? Wise choice, Fred. I still like Laura. She's still my friend. But will I introduce her to any other big winners who might help her? I can't take the chance. How to set up your instant replay? Instant replay is simple and cheap. Go to your local electronics store and ask for a recorder for your telephone. Slap it on your phone receiver and plug the other end into a cassette recorder. Then turn the recorder on during your next important conversation. The device could earn you hundreds of dollars on your first call. In some states, the law requires you inform the other party you are recording them. Make sure to check with the authorities about the legality in the state where you live. If it's one-party consent, don't worry. You're the one party. Obviously, you must never, ever use the tape for any other purpose than for your own second listening. Not only would that be unlawful, it would be unconscionable. For extra security, don't leave people's taped conversations lying around. Keep the same tape in your cassette machine and use it over and over to record important details. With instant replay, you can catch balls your conversation partner throws out on the first bounce. You're on the phone with your boss. He rambles off 4 or 5 names in a law firm you're supposed to write to, then the address, then the 9-digit zip code. Realizing he's pitched you some pretty fast balls, he asks, "Shall I repeat that for you?" "No thanks. I got it," you proudly say, silently tapping your little tape recorder. Boss is impressed. Technique 70. Instant replay. Record all your business conversations and listen to them again. The second or third time, you pick up on significant subtleties you missed the first time. It's like football fans who often don't know if there was a fumble until they see it all over again in instant replay. Yet another benefit of instant replay, it helps hide your ignorance. Recently, I was on the phone with a cameraman negotiating a price on a videotape to use as a speaker's demo. Luckily, I was recording the conversation because his flurry of high 8, VHS, Super VHS, Beta SP, and 3/4-inch U-matic had me wanting to crawl into a rodent hole in the wall. But I listened to the tape of our conversation afterward. I wrote down all the words I didn't understand and then asked a video friend what they meant. Now I was able to call the cameraman back and say, "I'd like a 2-camera shoot on Beta SP. And can you give me a VHS dub so I can do some offline editing?" Don't you think I got a much better price than if I'd asked, "Duh, what's a Beta SP?" Forget what they said. Hear what they meant. Instant replay also makes you sensitive to levels of communication far deeper than just your caller's words. You tune in to their real enthusiasm or hesitation about an idea. When we want something, our minds play funny tricks on us. If we desperately crave yes from someone, we hear yes. But yes isn't always what it seems. A client's forceful yes and her hesitant yeses are different as heaven and hell. Last month, I asked a woman who'd booked me for a speech if her office could reproduce my 10-page handout. She gave me the answer I wanted, which was yes. Later, however, I re-listened to our conversation on tape. Her answer about the handouts had been a very hesitant, well, yes. I immediately called her back and said, "By the way, don't worry about those handouts. Oh, I'm so glad," she purred, "because we really don't have the budget for things like that." I gained much more in my client's goodwill than the value of reproducing a few sheets of paper. Let us now return to your live, in-person show. We are going to talk not only about how to be a hit at a party, but how to smoothly hit on all the folks you want, just like a politician.